I'm reminded of Scott Peck, one of my favorite authors. You know, he wrote The Road Less Traveled about responsibility, personal responsibility, and then he wrote The People of the Lie about the nature of evil. And I heard him once say that he understood religion. He came to understand religion when he came to understand that his job was not to develop a relationship with orthodoxy, but his job was to develop a relationship with paradoxy. So there is some paradox in the Oregon experience. So those of you who are comfortable with paradox and a little bit of mystery will be comfortable with what I have to say about Oregon. First of all, one of the expectations, I would imagine, would be that you decriminalize something and the incidence goes up. Not true. It is not true in Oregon. The incidence of aid in dying, and as you all know, in Oregon, euthanasia is illegal in all instances, physician or not. And so aid in dying is when the physician writes a prescription, but the control remains with the patient. The patient must self-administer medications in Oregon. But in 2005, and you heard from Lord Jaffe that about 30,000 people die in Oregon every year, 38 deaths by aid in dying in 2005. Over 8 years, only 390 prescriptions have been written, and 246 people have ended their lives taking medication legally under the Oregon Death with Dignity Act. Now, we know that the influence of the act, the impact of the act goes way beyond the number of people who actually take medication, largely due to extraordinary scholarly research that has been done. We know that 1 in 6 dying Oregonians has a conversation with their family about, gee, I might want to use that law. What do you think, guys? You know, if things got really rough for me, would it be okay? Could you support me in my desire to end my life if I were suffering unbearably? 1 in 6 has that conversation, and that is a very, very potent conversation. 1 in 50 has that conversation with their doctor. Doctor, would you participate in the Oregon Death with Dignity Act? Would you be willing to write a prescription for me? So 1 in 50 begins the process and puts in their first initial request. 1 in 1,000 takes medication and dies as a result of taking that medication. 1 in 1,000 in Oregon. What is it in every other state? We know from anonymous, good, scholarly research that in every other state in the nation, 1 in 250 deaths is a result of a deliberate request on the part of a patient or a deliberate action on the part of the physician that has the effect of ending suffering and ending the life. So decriminalization has reduced the incidence of planned aid in dying by a factor of 4. And that, to many, is paradoxical. Another misperception, mispreconception, of course, was that aid in dying was going to be an alternative to hospice, that it was going to deter end-of-life care in Oregon. And I won't repeat what we all heard, the excellent statistics that Lord Jaffe quoted. In fact, it has had the opposite effect. It has prompted some of the best end-of-life care in the nation. It has prompted utilization of hospice care so that now 50%, over 50% of people in Oregon die in hospice care. Now, if we had thought about it, I guess we could have predicted that. Why would aid in dying be an alternative to excellent end-of-life care? Would a rational person make that kind of decision, say, gee, should I opt for the very best end-of-life care that I can have, or should I take pills and kill myself? The rational person wants both. And so people, being rational, want the very best end-of-life care. But if they are in that unfortunate 2 to 10% of people for whom the very best palliative care cannot address their symptoms, then they want out. And they want out quickly and painlessly and surely. Another misconception was that, gee, this will probably just be a few doctors in Oregon. There will be 2 or 3 maybe who will do all of the prescribing. They will write all of the prescriptions for barbiturates. Well, in 2005, it was 39 doctors who wrote 64 prescriptions. And far from being just a few of those 39 doctors, 74% of them wrote only 1 prescription. In fact, aid in dying has been integrated into end-of-life care by family practitioners and oncologists and general internists, doctors of all kinds, who more and more are understanding that this is good end-of-life care, offering your patient options to use at their own discretion, of which this might be the option of last resort, is part and parcel of excellent end-of-life care. Not to say that they aren't trepidatious and unsure and need to be educated and through the steps, because after all, it's a complex system. There are a lot of forms to fill out. There are a lot of duties to perform. And so they do need some guidance, and they do need some help to assure themselves that they really have met the letter of the law. But given that guidance, hundreds of physicians in Oregon have participated in one way or another, either as the attending physician or the consulting physician or a psychiatrist for psychiatric evaluation. Another misconception, an oddity, if you will, something that we might not have anticipated, we probably thought that people who got their medication in their possession would take it. 40% don't. 40% of the people who go through all those steps, and it does take determination to go through all those steps, 40% of those do not take their medication. And that doesn't count all of the hundreds of people who go through all the steps save the last, saying, well, now I'm eligible, I could get my prescription at a moment's notice, I don't need to go any further, I don't want to waste the medication or whatever. So they don't actually get reported to the state if they go through all the steps just short of obtaining the prescription. But even those who obtain the prescription and have it in their hands, 40% of them don't take it. It's in their bedside table, it's under their pillow, it's in their refrigerator. They say, it's my parachute, it's my safety blanket, it's my insurance policy. I want it close. I know it will be there when I need it, but I don't need to take it. Why don't they need to take it? They don't need to take it because they have not reached that point where they judge their suffering unbearable. And I absolutely agree with Rob. Only the patient knows. The patients are in charge. It's their job to judge their suffering. This is why it's very difficult to imagine, difficult for me to imagine a legislative scheme where you have to prove your suffering. Because it's not actually current suffering that I'm necessarily talking about. I know, me, the patient, I know that between 2 and 10% of patients will experience symptoms that cannot be controlled by palliative care. 2 to 10%, but 100% of people worry about it. 100% of people don't want to be in that 2 to 10%. So it's the 100% of people who are greatly comforted by the assurance that if it turns out that they are in that 2 to 10%, and it turns out that it comes upon them rapidly, they will have the means to make a peaceful and a humane escape.